Hey, Lois.
Hey, Rabbi, how are you?
Excellent. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Very well.
Good.
Mhm.
Sorry about yesterday. I ended up taking my grandson, Gabriel, to a Cubs game.
Oh, how old is Gabriel?
I believe he is 7.
Ah, did they win?
They won, and it was actually a great pitching performance from the Cubs. They have a pitcher, Steele. I think his name's Jonathan Steele, who is a Cy Young contender, and he pitched incredibly well. And it was a 5-0 shutout. It was a packed stadium, and
Wow, even in the heat, I guess.
I know. Well, we got the AY. My son AY had gotten the tickets. It just, I don't know if this is just brilliant thinking or a coincidence, but it was under the roof, so you weren't in direct sunlight, and there was a bit of a cool breeze, I think, from the lake. So it actually was very comfortable. And that section is where the kosher hot dog stand is. So afterwards I thought about it, like, even with if I had unlimited funds, I would probably get seats right where we were sitting because of those conditions.
That's very nice. Very nice.
Yeah. So it worked out well, and it was cute. It was the first time he was ever at Wrigley.
Yeah. Does he understand baseball well?
Well,
I mean,
he's gone to games before. Even like a couple weeks ago, we went to some minor league games. So he's been to baseball games before, and he gets the the gist of it. And yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
It was cool. It was cute.
The Chicago Dogs are back. I hear that on the commercial every day.
Well, we had a Chicago dog, but we ate ours instead of watching Chicago. Yes.
I see. Okay. David, come on.
There was something to be able to eat. Like, they had other offerings at that kosher stand, but I felt like I have to get a hot dog. You have to have a hot dog at a baseball game. I can't have a steak sandwich at a baseball game just because of the tradition.
Where would you have a steak sandwich? At a hockey
They
game?
sold it. They have a kosher stand. And
that's nice.
They had hot dogs. They had a kosher steak sandwiches, etc. But I felt like, no, if
you need a hot
dog, you have to get the hot dog.
Okay.
All right, here we go. Let's see what we're doing here.
Did I might have told you that my nephew, my brother's oldest boy, Ben, is the director of Skokie operations, the manager of Skokie operation for hockey, all the hockey teams that come. It's like his dream job, an absolute dream job for him.
And
he's setting up classes. He's doing well so far. They melt the ice, I guess, so they're relaying the ice, and they're setting up classes, and he's happy so far.
That's awesome. Is there what is that called? A Zamboni? What is that?
Yeah, well, that smooths out the ice, doesn't it?
Does he get to drive that? I mean,
I don't know. Probably not. He just tells them where to go. He tells them what to do.
There's nothing about hockey he doesn't know.
Well, that's true.
There's nothing about the rules of baseball he doesn't know, because he's an umpire.
No, Ben isn't an umpire. My brother's the umpire. All right, never.
Whatever. Well, we don't have any fruit.
Yes, we do. It's all on the table we have a class at 11:45. So
we won't go long.
Oh, please, please go long. Right. Okay, let's go.
Okay, so we are now talking about a sort of interesting law, Mitzvah 142. That is that he commanded us to press the Gentile and to force him to pay his debt, just as we have been commanded to pity the Jew and have been prohibited from pressing him. And that is his, may he be blessed, saying, the Gentiles shall you press. And the language of the Sifrei, and the Gentiles shall you press, this is a positive commandment. So clearly we are talking about a God-fearing Gentile. We are talking, because whenever we talk about the laws of Gentiles in the land, they are the only Gentiles that should be living in the land, are God-fearing Gentiles. Whether or not they actually have to keep the entire Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach or not, I think is a matter of discussion amongst the Rishonim, amongst the medieval commentaries. In order to be a Ger Toshav, do you just have to believe in the one God, or do you also have to keep all the Noachide laws? But God-fearing they need to be, not idolaters. So we're talking about a God-fearing person who's living as a resident in the land of Israel. And we are, when it comes to loans, we are told to be aggressive when collecting loans from Gentiles. This is not often mentioned in that list. We are, for instance, not supposed to take ribis. We're not supposed to take interest on loans to Jews. We are allowed to loan to Gentiles with interest. And that was a matter, as we all know, that became a big part of the kind of caricature of the Jew, certainly in Europe, for hundreds of years, that we were the moneylenders. But this is sort of interesting. The tone of it is interesting. And that this would be one of the 613 mitzvahs, to be aggressive in collecting loans from Gentiles, which would mean not showing the same concern that you have towards Jews about pressing them for loans. So it's just
doesn't it seem to carry the implication in some way that it's a mitzvah, a positive mitzvah, to lend money to Gentiles? Otherwise, how could you press them?
Well, you could say, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't have to be. I mean, you could say that.
Well, it's like sending away the mother bird.
No.
In a way, it is.
No, I'm saying if you lent the money, then you should aggressively pursue it. Doesn't necessarily say it's a mitzvah to lend it to them.
No, but
right.
But it's a necessary condition.
Right, but the necessary condition doesn't necessarily mean it's a mitzvah.
Well, no, but it's
because we've had this before where you have mitzvahs that, like, for instance, let's say divorce. It's not a mitzvah to get a divorce. It's once you're doing a divorce, you do it in a certain way. So, and he had identified these that are more like what you would call procedural mitzvahs, that there's a particular way to do something, or once you find yourself in a circumstance, this is what you should do. I hear what you're saying. I just don't think that you have, I don't think it's compelling from this particular mitzvah alone. If you had something.
Yeah, but we do have other things that seem to point in the.
Like what? That it's a mitzvah to actually lend money to Gentiles.
To get interest.
Yeah, I'm curious if you have.
This is a way to make money.
Yeah, I'm saying I'm curious to see where you think there's support for that idea. It would be interesting,
Well, okay,
'Cause
okay. What about sending away the mother bird?
What about-
People do that, and they place themselves
the only
deliberately
reason
in
they do
situations
that,
like that in
that's
order.
Kabbalistic. That's only a Kabbalistic motivation. Whenever they do that, they always cite the Kabbalistic motivation.
Well, it's also a thing that you want to collect mitzvahs. There's sort of a consequentialist
No.
sort of stream there.
I don't think so. No, because then I mean I would say there was that group that's mentioned in the tractate Nazir, that there was a group that of pious like Hasidim, that I mean not the what they called Hasidim in the time of the Talmud,
Yeah.
who wanted to bring a sin offering, but they didn't want to sin. So therefore, they became a Nazir in order to bring a sin offering.
Yeah, we had mentioned that. Yeah.
Right. So they for them, I could hear that group of pietists, maybe, I don't know, maybe they just somebody from their group decided to get married just so they could do a divorce. Clearly, the Rambam wouldn't have supported that notion. Whenever you hear people talk about the thing with the shooing away the mother bird, of going out of your way to do it, they talk about the actual impetus to go out of your way to do it is a Zohar. If it wouldn't be for the Zohar, I don't think people would do it, because unless you were actually planning on eating the eggs. But if you're not planning on eating the eggs, I don't know if people would do it. I don't know if people would have thought that this is something that you should go out of your way to do.
Well, on the other hand, it has an inherent big reward.
Right. Yeah, that's true. The thing of having long life. Right. Here you don't, but even so, yeah, you don't hear people going out of their way to do it for the long life, which is interesting, actually. That's very interesting. Why isn't that the motivation? Almost always when you see it, it's about that Zohar. They quote a Zohar about the cries of the mother bird are quicken the geula, the redemption, or something. Which
Rabbi,
is ironic.
Does anyone give an explanation of why you should press a Gentile? And just, it is.
You know what? All right. So this is called Lingosh Ha'akum Lachricho. All right. Let's do some research in real life, in real time.
I once made up a reason to somebody but that wouldn't apply, because you said this applies to Gentiles who live in the land. I made up the reason that since they would be passing through, you would press them because they might leave before they repaid. Whereas with the Jew who's living with you, you could always collect,
Yeah, but I'm assuming that here that they're talking about.
Yeah. But does this apply outside the land? I mean, do Jews here supposed to press?
Right. The thing is, outside the land, we don't have authority. This seems to be talking about in a place where the system is run by Jews and like the courts but maybe, I mean,
yeah.
I guess it would apply if you had a loan. And somebody, yeah. So let's just look this up, because then that would be another question. Let's say you have a loan to a Gentile, even nowadays. Would you be, and you want to forgive the loan, or you want to not, or you want to
aggravate them,
give them? Yeah. So are you allowed to? Yeah. So let's just see this. Why? Yes. And Gentile. I always have to put like halacha at the end of these, otherwise I get weird answers.
Yeah.
collecting debts the halachic way.
Okay.
Now, but Torah.org is interesting, but I just always prefer Har Etzion when they do it. Just like this.
They always have high quality stuff. Every time.
I agree. So let's see here. All right. The Torah specifically commands us to help our fellow man with free loans. If you lend money to my people. All right. So this is from Rabbi Asher Meir. If you lend money to my people, to the poor among you, don't be like a creditor to him. Don't impose interest on him. If you should pawn your fellow's garment, return it to him by nightfall. In other words, you're the pawnbroker. We might think that helping a needy person with charity would be an even greater kindness, but our tradition clearly indicates the opposite. Giving alone is considered a greater mitzvah than giving charity, so much so that the Hebrew word for a free loan is a gemah, an acronym for gemilut chasadim, meaning granting kindness. The linguistic identity points to a cultural reality that giving a loan is the basic act of mutual aid in Judaism. This special importance is not solely because the lender gains no benefit from the loan. In fact, making a business partnership with a needy person where there is an expectation of profit is considered on an equal level with a loan. The greatest level of charity with nothing higher is to strengthen the hand of a weakened Jew, give him a present or loan, or starting a partnership, or giving him work. And that is Shulchan Aruch Yoredea 249.6. While a present is also mentioned, the intention is not a handout, but a regular present like those given among equals, where there is an expectation of reciprocation. One reason we can identify why a loan is even more beneficial than a handout is that it indicates the lender has faith in the borrower. In this way, it provides not only material, but also moral support. This faith has two aspects. On the most basic level, giving a loan shows faith that the borrower is an honest person who won't disappear after receiving the money. But a loan also shows the lender's faith that the borrower is a successful person, one who, though he's fallen on hard times, is sure to recoup his losses and find himself earning a respectable income. Often the monetary difficulties caused by financial setbacks are the least of one's problems. A few bad seasons in business or losing a job can cause a person to become discouraged about the future and lose hope. The encouragement provided by the lender's faith in the borrower may be even more important to the needy person than the money itself. This aspect of encouragement is particularly evident in the various limitations on collecting a loan. The passage we cited states, don't act like a creditor towards the borrower, enjoining one not to hound him for repayment if you know he can't pay. Other limitations on collection include the rules which prevent collecting from possessions which are essential to the borrower's livelihood, including the subsequent verse which indicates that we may not take the borrower's garment as a pledge unless we return it when he's in need of it. Indeed, in ancient times, the borrower himself or his family members were themselves pledged to a loan and could be enslaved if the loan was not repaid. That was that case of the woman who approaches Elisha and tells him that her children are now sort of enslaved as pledges for loans that her husband had taken out, and her husband was no longer alive. And that's when Elisha, this was Elisha's version of it. Eliyahu had done something similar, but Elisha asked her to borrow a bunch of vessels and closed the doors, and they filled with oil. He told her to sell the oil. And even today's debtors may be imprisoned for failing to repay a loan. Is that true? Is that true? What does he mean?
We missed that last thing you said.
Indeed, in ancient times, the borrower himself or his family members were themselves pledged to a loan and could be enslaved if a loan was not repaid. And even today, debtors may be imprisoned for failing to repay a loan.
When was he writing? in the
Uh,
19th century in England,
maybe,
debtor's prison.
maybe. I think he is a character in a Charles Dickens novel. I'm not sure. Such a drastic collection methods contradict the idea of encouraging the downtrodden in two ways. Firstly, if the loan has the effect of subjugating, demeaning the borrower, it will not be very successful in providing with moral support. Furthermore, if the lender has ironclad guarantees that he will get his money back, then the loan is not much of a vote of confidence. But since the lender is limited in his ability to seize assets and can't lien the borrower himself, his loan shows his confidence in the borrower's ability to improve his financial situation. Of course, the halacha demands that the borrower do his best to be worthy of this confidence and not make unnecessary expenditures or unjustified gifts that will prevent the lender from recouping his investment. Of such a borrower, Scripture states, it is a wicked borrower who doesn't repay. All right, faith in the Creator. This humanistic theme in lending is matched by a religious one. The Talmud likens collecting improper interest on a loan to denying the Torah. Conversely, the Medrash states that lending money to the needy is comparable to fulfilling all the mitzvahs. One idea behind these statements is that all of our possessions and even our lives can be considered a loan from the Creator. While we enjoy our wealth in this world, in the end, we have to leave our wealth to others, even as we give up our souls to God. By being generous and forbearing with our possessions during our lifetime, we demonstrate that our attachment to them is not excessive. We recognize that our money is not really ours, but only a deposit or trust entrusted to us by God in order to carry out His will. The Medrash likens someone who fails to use his money to alleviate suffering to one who takes from the treasury of a king and uses it to oppress his very own subjects. Likewise, all of our money is from God, as the Scripture states, Haggai 2:8, mine is the silver and mine is the gold. Loans exemplify this faith even more than charity because they particularly demonstrate the concept of stewardship. A person whose funds are his own is free to dispose them any ways he likes, but the administrator of a fund has a responsibility to maintain the endowment. Giving a loan with the expectation of getting the money back shows our desire to continue administrating this deposit from God in accordance with His directives. By the same token, God has a particular reason to give a person wealth if He knows that the person will use it according to His will. His with a capital H. The Medrash states that King Solomon prayed, if you see a person who acts aptly with his wealth, give him more. As it is written in Divrei Hayamim 2:6-3, give to each person according to his ways, for you know his heart. This is a midrash. The book of Mishlei states that one who helps the poor lends to God, implying that the lender is sure to be repaid. A related theme mentioned in the Medrash is that giving loans is a way of acknowledging that we ourselves are subject to God's providence. A person who trusts in his own might and ability is not worried that he may lose his wealth, but one who recognizes that it is God who gives strength to act mightily is aware that the next time around he may be the one needing a loan. For it is a revolving wheel in the world. The one who is rich today may not be rich tomorrow, and the one who is poor today may not be poor tomorrow. We explained in the previous chapter that the halacha is insistent that a debtor does his best to pay off his creditors. In seeming contradiction to this emphasis, the Torah mandates a release of debts once in 7 years at the end of the sabbatical year. This includes the commandment to release debts when this year passes, the commandment to abstain from collecting these debts, and at the same time a warning not to refrain from lending money in anticipation of the release. So it seems a bit surprising that despite this stern warning, our sages indicate that it is commendable for the borrower to return the money regardless. First, it is necessary for the lender to affirm that he is wholeheartedly releasing the debt, and then only afterwards is it praiseworthy for the borrower to say, even so, he wants to return the money. This is a Mishnah in Shvis. So even though there is a amnesty for that loan, the person should still want to pay it. There is a discussion. I remember I was at this, it was called the Business Halacha Summit My son really asked me to attend it. It was and it was really, I really liked it a lot. It was really well done. So it was shortly before Pesach, and it was in Schaumburg. It was a couple-day event, and they had really knowledgeable, knowledgeable dayanim who were really integrated into the business world, talking. And they also had some older, like Rabbi First was one of the older ones. But one of the things Rabbi First said was that it is unclear to him that if somebody goes bankrupt, he made it sound like he believes that if somebody went bankrupt, in many circumstances, they still owe the money, halachically, even if the laws of bankruptcy of the country make it that you don't owe it. But he didn't go into a lot of detail about it. He just mentioned it sort of generally, that it's not a simple matter, and that just because somebody went bankrupt doesn't necessarily mean they don't owe the people money afterwards, which is sort of interesting. According to Rav Kook, go ahead.
No, I remember because I read this article. Must have been 20 years ago in the Journal of Halacha and Modern Society, that they reviewed that particular question. It seemed to be a subtle law.
That what? You still owe the money?
That bankruptcy does not protect you from a debt that you owe to a fellow Jew.
According to Rav Kook, we can begin to understand. Did we say anything about Rav Kook yet? No. Okay. According to Rav Kook, we can begin to understand these halachot by recognizing that every loan has both a monetary and a personal aspect. From the monetary side of things, it's certainly fair and proper for the borrower to return the money that he borrowed. This is the principle that applies to transactions between Jews and non-Jews. The lender gave the money, so the borrower must return it. However, the Torah reminds us that behind this monetary inequality, there is a profound personal inequality. The borrower is simultaneously dependent on the lender as well as subordinated to him through a personal lien, creating a type of slavery in miniature. The scripture tells us the rich man rules over the poor. The borrower is a slave to the lender. Eved lova leish malva. The borrower is a slave to the lender, as it says in Proverbs. The analogy between debt and slavery helps us understand the release of debts in the Shemitah year. Just as Jewish slave is released from work in the 7th year, so a Jewish borrower is released at the end of the 7-year Shemitah cycle. Indeed, these commandments appear in consecutive passages in the Torah. As we pointed out in chapter 65, it also helps us understand the prohibitions against charging a fellow Jew interest. Just as a Jewish slave may not be excessively subjugated, so a Jewish borrower may not be charged interest. In other words, that would be excessive subjugation. These commandments, too, appear in consecutive passages in the Torah in Vayikra, that's in Parshas Bahar, Torah portion of Bahar. While the halacha certainly affirms the idea of fairness in monetary transactions, this principle cannot be rigidly upheld when it conflicts with the idea of freedom. God tells us, "For the children of Israel are slaves to me," and our sages inferred slaves to me, but not servants to servants. Other human beings. Kedushin 22b. Welcome to Daf Yomi. So, once in 7 years, debts are released. It is true that when the monetary and human aspects of the loan conflict, the human aspect must dominate. However, the ideal would be to avoid conflict altogether. One way that this can occur is for the lender to assert that he wholeheartedly releases the debtor from that obligation. Then the aspect of personal subjugation is removed. Only the aspect of monetary fairness remains. So it is commendable in such a case to return the money. So again, they keep on saying commendable. He's not required to, clearly.
And he's just talking about Shemitah.
That's so far just Shemitah.
Okay.
The same objective is achieved by transferring debts to the Beis Din through prusbul. While it is abhorrent for an individual to subordinate another, it is understood that all are subordinate to the authority of the Beis Din. Did this not say at the beginning? I just want to look at the top here. Oh, it's just loans and debts in halacha. And I made, well, this was a good, we'll just call this a good introduction to the subject. Did not talk about the Gentile issue.
Yeah. Now, like you said before, that you might, have pity on somebody, but the way that the Rambam's saying it, you have to go out of your way to oppress them.
I know. In other words,
you have to deal with him harshly.
Well,
you have to bang on his door.
And it makes it sound like, because like Rashi said over there, obviously you're allowed to ask somebody to pay back a loan. So when it says do not exceedingly go after them, that word lid gosh, which they say like exceedingly go after them, they are talking about where it may not be easy for him to pay it back, because you're allowed to ask a Jew to pay back. You're just not supposed to use like what we would call aggressive means to get it back.
Unless they're a Gentile.
It's very, that you should oppress. It's a positive mitzvah to oppress another human being.
Yeah, I know. It's weird.
Oof.
All right, let's go back to Torah. All right. Is there if there's a Torah provision, you should not act like a creditor when collecting a loan. When is it forbidden for a lender to make a claim against a borrower because of this prohibition? And when and how is permitted to claim from a borrower? There are many factors involved in answering these questions as follows. A lender is permitted to request payment from a borrower when a loan becomes due. He need not be concerned that the borrower might not have the funds or property that he could sell to repay the debt. This is especially true if the lender thinks that the borrower has forgotten about the debt. It's only forbidden to claim a debt if the lender knows that the borrower is unable to pay, and claiming this money will only cause him discomfort. Now, that would have to be the scenario with the Gentile, right? Because if it's, so the scenario with the Gentile would have to be that he doesn't have the money. Right? And you're now pressing him, even though he doesn't have the money. Because otherwise, you're allowed to do this to a Jew. If the Jew has the money, you're allowed to ask him for the money. All right. If a lender requests payment of a due debt and the borrower replies that he does not presently have the funds to repay it, the lender is not obligated to believe this to be true and is permitted to continue a request payment afterwards until the borrower presents proof in Beis Din that he presently unable to repay the debt. So again, asking him and then asking him again, even though the guy says he doesn't have it, is allowed with a Jew. Even if the lender knows for a fact that the borrower does not have cash with which to pay him, he's permitted to request payment if the borrower has property that he could sell. However, this is only true if after selling the property to pay off the debt, the borrower would have enough left over for basic minimal living expenses and a place to live. This is in accordance with the rule of Mesadrin Lebal Chov, which is we try to make order for the one who owes money. We make reasonable arrangements for debtors, as stated in the Shulchan Aruch Hoshem Mishpat. Similarly, even if he knows that the borrower has no means with which to repay a loan now, a lender may file a claim against the borrower in a Beis Din so that they should confirm his debt and evaluate the ability of the borrower to repay over an extended amount of time. So again, this is not what the Rambam's talking about, because this is all permitted to do to a Jew.
I know. Imagine what you can do to a
I know. As we have stated above, A lender is not permitted to demand payment if he is certain that the borrower doesn't have the ability to pay it back. As a matter of fact, he's also forbidden to frequent areas that the borrower frequents so that he may see him and be uncomfortable. This prohibition applies even if the lender did not lend personal funds, but is an officer of a free loan fund that serves the public. He's still forbidden from claiming the funds when he knows for a fact the borrower has no way to repay him. All the above only applies to debts that occur through loans, not the debts that occur through sales on credit. Interesting. Damages. According to the Torah, a borrower is not obligated to borrow from others to repay his debt. Interesting. According to the Torah, a borrower is not obligated to borrow from others to repay his debt. Therefore, if he doesn't have funds, it's forbidden to demand payment, even in the hope that he will borrow from others to repay him. However, today it is common practice for people who need large sums of money to borrow from one source and then roll the loan over to another source when it becomes due. Since at the time of the loan, they intended to borrow from others to repay it, under these circumstances, it's permitted to demand payment, even if you know that the only way they can pay it is to take out a loan from others. If, however, the lender knows that the borrower has no other source of credit, and he does not have possessions to sell with which to pay back his debt, the Torah prohibition to claim such a loan remains intact. Just gonna see the notes here. So far,
Interesting.
nobody's saying anything about Gentiles.
No.
Could, all right.
Well, with Gentiles, you
Like-
just do whatever you want.
It's our main industry. It's our main industry. You know, it's like a farmer not having how to milk a cow. You know?
No. This can't. For some reason, I don't know how to go back to Google once I'm doing this.
Sounds like me. Brother. I wonder if, I don't know, is it trying to tell us that we shouldn't be afraid of Gentiles? You know, afraid to press them. And
Well, it's
ask them?
I don't know if this is the Torah. This is what my mind is saying.
Yeah, right. I mean, I don't.
It looked like they were going to talk about it. I'm going to try to get this before we meet again tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Get somebody to talk about this. Yeah.
Everything in the Torah is interesting.
Yeah, but this.
Except for the sections we just studied. As far as you can take, Parshas Vayikra and throw it in the whatever. Make it. I know, but boy, is that hard to get through.
Press. Why must we press Gentiles? All righty. Thank you, guys. I'm
Thank
thankful
you,
for
really.
learning.
Press them so they won't think we're pussies. We won't think.
You got to show that world. Jews are tough.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
All right,
Thank you, Rabbi.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.